The Civil War is one of the most studied conflicts in American history, but even the most dedicated history buffs might be surprised by some of its lesser-known facts. Did you know that a sitting U.S. president was once arrested during the war? Or that some battles were fought as far west as New Mexico? From bizarre battlefield moments to unexpected alliances, the Civil War was full of surprises. Stick around as we uncover 10 surprising facts about this pivotal moment in history. And if you love learning about the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more fascinating stories from history. One-third of the soldiers who fought for the Union Army were immigrants. The Union Army during the Civil War was a truly diverse and multinational force. While the contributions of Irish soldiers are often highlighted, making up about 7.5% of the Army, there was a larger group of German immigrants who played a significant role, comprising roughly 10% of the ranks. These soldiers often served in distinctive regiments, such as the Steuben Volunteers, named after the famed Prussian military officer Baron von Steuben. In addition to the Irish and Germans, soldiers in the Union Army hailed from various other European backgrounds, including French, Italian, Polish, English, and Scottish. The diversity within the ranks was striking, with many regiments consisting predominantly of immigrant soldiers. In fact, approximately one-quarter of the Union's regiments were largely made up of foreign-born soldiers. The inclusion of black soldiers in the Union Army, which began in 1863, marked a transformative moment in the conflict. African Americans served in regiments like the United States Colored Troops, USCT, and despite facing significant racial prejudice, became crucial to the Union's efforts. Some historians suggest that the enlistment of black soldiers helped shift the momentum in the Union's favor. This influx of manpower and dedication may very well have been one of the key factors that helped the Union eventually prevail in the war. The broader involvement of various ethnic groups not only added strength to the Union Army, but also reflected the melting pot of cultures that formed the foundation of the United States. Lincoln was shot at and almost killed. On a quiet evening in August of 1863, President Abraham Lincoln, weary after a long day at the White House, set out on horseback for a solitary ride to the soldier's home, which served as his family's summer residence. As he made his way, a private stationed at the gate heard a gunshot echo through the air. Moments later, Lincoln's horse came racing toward the compound, with the president clinging to the animal's back, his hat nowhere to be seen. Lincoln later explained that the shot had been fired near the bottom of the hill, causing the startled horse to break into a frantic gallop. In the rush, his hat was knocked off, and the horse continued at full speed, its path uncontrollable. When two soldiers went to retrieve the president's hat, they discovered a startling detail. A bullet hole had pierced right through the brim. Despite the close call, Lincoln took a calm approach to the situation. He instructed the guards to keep the event a secret, asking them not to share the details with his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln. At the time, Mary was already grappling with the stresses of the war, and the president did not want to add to her worries. This incident highlights not only the risks that Lincoln faced, but also his constant efforts to protect his loved ones from the harsh realities of his role during such a tumultuous period in American history. General Ulysses S. Grant wasn't the bloodiest general of the war. Robert E. Lee was. During the spring of 1864, as the Civil War raged on, Mary Lincoln criticized General Ulysses S. Grant, referring to him as a butcher for the devastating losses his troops endured during the Overland Campaign. The Union forces suffered twice the number of casualties as General Robert E. Lee's Confederate Army. However, if you consider the casualties in relation to the size of the forces, Lee's army actually experienced greater losses throughout the war. This discrepancy can be attributed to Lee's aggressive tactics. He was known for his preference for offensive action, and his willingness to engage in direct combat helped him secure significant victories, such as those at Chancellorsville and Fredericksburg. But this bold approach came at a high cost. Lee's army suffered severe casualties, and one of the most notable examples of this is Pickett's charge at Gettysburg, which resulted in staggering losses for the Confederates. Lee's relentless pursuit of attacks eventually wore down the Army of Northern Virginia, leading to its decimation. Though Lee's approach brought him some early successes, it also ultimately contributed to the slow but steady erosion of his forces. His willingness to sacrifice soldiers for the sake of battlefield glory was a factor that hindered his long-term strategy and contributed to the Confederacy's eventual defeat. This pattern of high casualties in pursuit of decisive victories defines much of the struggle between the two sides, where every battle's outcome was shaped by complex military decisions and the human cost of war. Harriet Tubman led a raid to free enslaved people during the Civil War. Harriet Tubman, a courageous woman who had escaped slavery and dedicated herself to helping others find freedom via the Underground Railroad, became a crucial figure in the Union's war efforts. In the spring of 1862, she arrived at the Union camp in Port Royal, South Carolina, eager to support the Union cause. Tubman initially focused on empowering freed black women by teaching them skills that could help them earn wages, particularly through working with the Union Army. However, Tubman's role quickly expanded beyond education. She began gathering valuable intelligence from the local freed black community and embarked on reconnaissance missions along the rivers, providing vital information about Confederate positions and movements. Her growing influence and resourcefulness didn't go unnoticed. On June 1, 1863, Tubman took part in an extraordinary mission alongside Union Colonel James Montgomery. Together, they led a group of 300 black Union soldiers into the heart of South Carolina. The troops moved swiftly through the plantations, liberating those who were enslaved and disrupting the Confederate infrastructure. Tubman observed with deep emotion as more than 720 enslaved men, women, and children rushed toward the safety of the Union forces. The scene was powerful, and Tubman likened it to the biblical story of the Israelites fleeing from Egypt, finding freedom after generations of oppression. This bold raid was remarkable not just for its success, but for its historical significance. Harriet Tubman, the first woman to lead a raid of this kind during the Civil War, liberated far more people than she had during her 10 years of work on the Underground Railroad. In a single operation, she freed 10 times the number of people she had helped escape in her earlier work. Tubman's bravery and leadership demonstrated that her commitment to freedom extended well beyond her personal journey, and she became a symbol of hope and courage in the fight for emancipation. Before William Tecumseh Sherman became a great Union general, in October of 1861, Union General William Tecumseh Sherman, who was in charge of defending Kentucky, made a bold request to U.S. Secretary of War Simon Cameron. He asked for 60,000 men to help defend his position and an additional 200,000 to take the offensive. However, Cameron, taken aback by the scale of Sherman's request, dismissed it as unrealistic and even extreme. He subsequently removed Sherman from his command. This abrupt demotion left Sherman deeply shaken. In a letter to his brother, he expressed his despair, revealing the emotional toll the situation had taken on him. He confessed that he might have considered suicide if not for the presence of his children, and he questioned whether he could ever be trusted with command again. Sherman's fragile state at the time painted a portrait of a man struggling with self-doubt and the harsh realities of leadership during such tumultuous times. Yet, in an unexpected turn of events, Sherman's fortunes changed just a few months later. In February of 1862, Ulysses S. Grant, who had begun to rise to prominence, reassigned Sherman to Paducah, Kentucky. Unlike Cameron, Grant saw past Sherman's earlier struggles and recognized his potential as a competent and capable leader. This reassignment would set the stage for Sherman's eventual transformation into one of the Union's most important and successful generals. As the war progressed and Sherman rose in stature, his loyalty to Grant became evident. When a civilian criticized Grant's character, Sherman defended his friend fiercely. He famously stated, "General Grant is a great general. He stood by me when I was crazy, and I stood by him when he was drunk. And now, sir, we stand by each other always." Sherman's words reflect the loyalty and mutual respect that would define their relationship for the rest of the war, illustrating the importance of camaraderie and understanding in the face of adversity. Both before and during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln pushed to send freed blacks abroad. The idea of colonization, which advocated for sending freed black people to other countries, had long been supported by a number of influential figures in American history. Notable figures like Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, Andrew Jackson, and Henry Clay, whom Abraham Lincoln greatly admired, had backed the concept. Even the renowned author Harriet Beecher Stowe, whose novel Uncle Tom's Cabin brought attention to the horrors of slavery, depicted the eventual emigration of her characters to Africa as a solution. In August of 1862, President Abraham Lincoln brought 5 black ministers to the White House to discuss the issue. During this meeting, Lincoln expressed his belief that slavery and the ongoing Civil War had revealed that separation was the best option for both black people and white Americans. He proposed a plan to relocate freed black people to Central America and even called for a constitutional amendment that would authorize Congress to fund this colonization effort. However, Lincoln's colonization plan faced significant opposition, particularly from leading abolitionists such as Frederick Douglass and William Lloyd Garrison. These figures found the idea of colonization deeply troubling and morally unacceptable, as they viewed it as an attempt to further marginalize black Americans rather than recognizing their right to equality within the United States. Despite Lincoln's efforts, the policy failed to gain traction, and after he signed the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863, he ceased advocating for colonization. The plan was quietly abandoned, and Lincoln never publicly addressed it again. This shift in Lincoln's approach reveals a deeper understanding of the complexity surrounding race and freedom. Over time, he moved away from the notion of separation and came to focus more on the integration and rights of freed black people within the United States. The abandonment of colonization illustrates how Lincoln's views evolved during the war, particularly as he began to embrace the idea of a united nation, no matter the race. Privates weren't cannon fodder. During the Civil War, Robert E. Lee's desire to personally lead a counterattack during the Battle of the Wilderness in May 1864, despite his troops urging him to stay back, would have been understood by his soldiers if he had held a lower rank. This was because during the Civil War, it was not uncommon for high-ranking officers, including generals, to lead their men directly into combat, which is quite rare in modern warfare. In that era, top officers didn't hesitate to put themselves in the line of fire alongside their troops, a practice that set them apart from the more detached leadership styles seen in later conflicts. This hands-on approach to leadership came with significant risks. As a result, generals in the Civil War were 50% more likely to be killed in action than privates. The Battle of Antietam in 1862 exemplified this danger, with 3 generals killed and 6 others wounded, on both the Union and Confederate sides. These losses were a stark reminder of the personal sacrifice and danger that leaders faced in battle, as they were often just as exposed as the soldiers they commanded. At the Battle of the Wilderness, Confederate General James Longstreet, known for his leadership and strategic skill, was severely wounded when a bullet struck him in the shoulder and throat. However, Longstreet was fortunate in that he survived the injury, returned to his command, and went on to live a long life. He outlived many of his peers, including both generals and privates, passing away in 1904 at the age of 82. His survival, despite the severe nature of his wounds, is an exception in a war where leaders often paid the ultimate price for their direct involvement in battle. The experience of generals like Longstreet, who faced both battlefield injuries and the challenge of leading men in such perilous conditions, reflects the extraordinary risks and sacrifices made by those at the highest levels of military command during the Civil War. Black Union soldiers refused their salaries for 18 months to protest being paid lower wages than white soldiers. When black soldiers began enlisting in the Union Army in early 1863, they were initially paid $10 per month, a sum significantly lower than their white counterparts who earned at least $13. This disparity was made even worse by the fact that black soldiers were uniquely charged a $3 monthly fee for clothing, effectively reducing their pay to just $7. This meant that the highest paid black soldier received about half of what the lowest paid white soldier earned, further deepening the sense of injustice and inequality. The financial disparity sparked widespread discontent among black troops. In response, entire black regiments collectively refused to accept their lower wages, showing solidarity and standing firm in their protest. Their resistance reflected not only their dissatisfaction with unequal pay, but also a broader desire for dignity and recognition in a war that they were risking their lives to win. This protest, combined with the tireless advocacy of abolitionist congressmen who championed the rights of black soldiers, ultimately led to a shift in policy. The courage and bravery that black soldiers had demonstrated on the battlefield, particularly in key engagements like the Battle of Fort Wagner, played a crucial role in building the case for wage equality. By September 1864, Congress relented and enacted a law that provided black soldiers with equal pay, effective retroactively to the date of their enlistment. For many of these soldiers, the new pay structure meant more than just financial fairness. It gave them the means to support their families back home. Sending money to their loved ones was a powerful symbol of their contribution to the war effort, not only as soldiers, but as active participants in the fight for freedom and equality. The decision to grant equal pay to black soldiers not only corrected an unjust practice, but also marked a critical step toward recognizing the value and humanity of black men who had volunteered to serve in the Union Army. Robert E. Lee's Virginia state was confiscated by the Union. As the Civil War unfolded in Virginia, Robert E. Lee and his wife Mary were forced to abandon their expansive 1,100-acre estate, Arlington, which offered a commanding view of Washington, D.C. In 1863, the U.S. government seized the estate due to the Lees' failure to pay a modest tax bill of $92.07. This marked the beginning of a long, complicated relationship between the Lee family and Arlington. The government's actions were not just financial, but symbolic. President Abraham Lincoln authorized the creation of a military cemetery on the estate, including the establishment of a burial vault right in the location of what had once been the estate's rose garden. According to Lee's biographer, Elizabeth Brown Pryor, the idea behind this was that, should Lee ever return to his home, he would be confronted by the sight of the graves. It was meant as a reminder of the war's devastation, underscoring the price of the conflict and symbolizing the heavy toll that Lee's leadership in the Confederacy had exacted on both sides. After the war ended, the Lee family quietly explored the possibility of reclaiming Arlington, but they never took any formal steps before Robert and Mary's deaths. The issue didn't fade, however. In 1877, their eldest son, George Washington Custis Lee, sought to regain ownership of the estate, claiming that its confiscation had been unlawful. The case eventually reached the U.S. Supreme Court, which ruled in favor of George, returning Arlington to the Lee family. However, the estate was now a graveyard for the many soldiers who had died during the war, making it an ironic and grim inheritance. Faced with the challenge of managing an estate now littered with thousands of graves, George Lee made the decision to sell Arlington back to the U.S. government for $150,000. This transaction marked the end of the Lee family's connection to the estate, but it also ensured that the land would continue to serve a significant national purpose. Over the years, Arlington National Cemetery grew, eventually becoming the final resting place for more than 250,000 soldiers, a poignant symbol of the sacrifices made during the Civil War. More men died in the Civil War than any other American conflict. The Civil War claimed the lives of approximately 625,000 soldiers, a staggering loss that exceeds the combined American casualties from World War I, World War II, the Korean War, and the Vietnam War. To put this into perspective, if the names of those who died in the Civil War were listed in the same manner as the names on the Vietnam War Memorial, the list would stretch more than 10 times the length of the iconic wall. This immense loss represented about 2% of the U.S. population at the time, a death toll that, if applied to today's population, would be roughly equivalent to 6 million men. While rifles were the most deadly weapons on the battlefield, it was disease that claimed the majority of lives during the war. As massive armies assembled, soldiers who had once been isolated and somewhat protected from diseases found themselves marching in close ranks and sleeping in overcrowded, poorly ventilated tents. These conditions created the perfect environment for the spread of contagious diseases. Illnesses such as mumps, chickenpox, and measles, typically associated with childhood, ran rampant in these encampments, claiming the lives of many soldiers who might have otherwise survived the war's physical dangers. Malaria, a common and often debilitating disease, affected over 1 million Union soldiers. The lack of proper sanitation, combined with the close quarters and exposure to contaminated water sources, facilitated the spread of disease in ways that were almost impossible to control. Epidemics of various illnesses were a constant threat, and these outbreaks often led to more deaths than the battlefront itself. The impact of disease on the Civil War underscores the harsh reality faced by soldiers who were not only fighting in a war, but also struggling against an invisible enemy that took more lives than weapons ever could. As we've seen, the Civil War was full of surprises. Whether it was the role of women on the battlefield, the unexpected bravery of black soldiers, or the staggering toll taken by disease, these lesser-known facts offer a deeper understanding of a conflict that shaped the course of American history in ways we're still grappling with today. If you enjoyed learning about these surprising facts and want to uncover more hidden stories from this pivotal time, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for more insights into the American Old West as we continue to explore the untold tales that define our history.